Welcome to HR.com Live. This podcast is produced by HR.com, the #1 destination to help 1.7 million HR executives maximize human potential and drive extraordinary business results.
Good afternoon and welcome to HR.com Live. My name is Dr. Heidi Scott and I'm the Chief Learning Officer here at HR.com, where I lead a team of learning and development specialists designers, etc. We create and provide innovative learning experiences aimed to equip HR professionals with the tools they need to lead, learn, and navigate their careers. I'll be your host for today on Learning and the New HR Leader. And in this episode, we're going to be talking with David Kelly about the now and next of learning and technology. David, thanks for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
So a little bit about David Kelly. He's the Executive Director of the eLearning Guild. However, before he joined the eLearning Guild, he spent about 15 years in some senior management positions at some large banks. He's a leading voice exploring how technology can be used to enhance training, education, learning, and organizational performance. He's also an active member of the learning community and frequently contributes to the industry by writing and speaking at events. He's known for his curation efforts, especially related to conferences and events for learning and performance professionals. And I'll let y'all know, I first got to know David in his role with DevLearn. We were speaking about this just a minute ago, and DevLearn, I describe it as the mecca of e-learning. If you want to know anything about e-learning, that's the place to go, David. That's my take. What's your take on DevLearn?
Oh, I'm fine with your take. I'm good with that. DevLearn is the conference that within our industry and within our focus that tends to lean towards how technology is shaping the future of what we do as learning and development professionals. And that's generally the lens that we always look through as we curate the conference every year.
Yes. Well, I think what's great as well is that the number of workshop presenters you have really geared to all facets of learning and development, from those that are new to instructional design to those that are leading teams. So I know I like to bring my team each year, and we will farm out and say who's going to do what to make sure we get it all, and then we'll bring it all back and have our own little brain fest collaborations on what everybody learned. So
yeah, we definitely curate the event with all levels of role and responsibility in mind.
Yes. Well, good. Well, hey, I just have a couple questions for you today. I'm thrilled to get some time with you. So, especially today as we think about the future, and we're always thinking about learning and technology, what's the future? What does the new now look like? And as we're trying to discern that, what are some problems as we try to predict when it comes to learning and technology?
Well, the biggest problem is that you can't. Nobody, before the current context of the world that we're in, nobody knows what the future is going to bring. And the best you can do is take the data that you have and use it to make educated guesses about the future. The problem what I always see in the prediction conversations is that they are without context. For instance, if you were going to tell me, hey, what should I be doing? What technology should I be looking at? And I start answering your question, I've already done you a disservice, because it's not really a matter of what's going to happen with learning and technology and why that and how that's going to affect the industry. It's more along the lines of what's happening with learning and technology and how's that going to affect you. There isn't really a right or a wrong answer to how you're using technology. There's a right or a wrong answer to how you're applying it to your current environment. I mean, you mentioned my experience there. I spent a good portion of my career in the financial world at two different banks. And those, even though they were both banks, they were both in the financial field, they were two entirely different worlds. One I was literally the entire training department, and one I led a team of about 15 different people, and it was a much larger bank. And when you look at the resources and such that are available in those two different environments, what makes one solution right for one organization and wrong for another is completely different. So when you start talking about the predictions, you take the data that you have, but you still have to put it into your own context to make sure that you're understanding what works for you as compared to what might work for someone else.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think you're dead on. And verbiage does matter. So when we think about buzzwords that are continually evolving, tell us the important differences we need to be mindful of when we hear learning technology, and then we also hear learning and technology? Can you just discern and decipher the nuances there that are pretty important?
Yeah, they're incredibly important, and it's something we often overlook. I mean, and I'm saying this as the person who helps run DevLearn, which is an e-learning conference. It focuses on, you go into there, you go into our expo hall, you see a bunch of learning technologies, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with learning technologies, but it's not the same thing as when I talk about learning and technology, because when you go through an expo hall and you see all the different learning technologies that are there, the words are important. They're really not learning technologies. They're education and training technologies for the most part. And that's not a bad thing, but the differences are very important. For instance, you and I are just meeting now, but I'm willing to bet my house that we've had a shared experience without realizing it. You're out to dinner with your friends, the drinks are flowing, the conversation's flowing, it's the best dinner you've ever had in your entire life. And then someone at that dinner will ask a question that brings the conversation to a halt. And because no one knows the answer. And someone will break that silence by saying something. What do you think it is?
I don't know. I'm thinking.
What's your natural reaction when you don't know, when you need some information? What do you might naturally?
I'm going to ask Siri if I needed some information, but I'm going to say what.
You're going to get the answer. No, most people at that dinner party are going to pull out their phone. They're going to ask Siri. They're going to Google it. They're going to do something. Nobody's going to be in that moment and say, you know what, that's a great question you just asked me, Heidi. I'm going to go into the LMS and see if I can find the answer. And that's not a criticism of learning management systems or HRIS systems or any system that we're using. It's like they do serve a very valuable purpose. But we live in a world where we are consistently tethered to the limitless world of the internet, and nobody thought, I mean, in L&D, we use the language of self-directed learning. And that's our jargon. Nobody at that table is going to say, you know what, I'm going to get this answer for myself because I'm a self-directed learner. They're just solving the problem of not knowing with the tools that they have available. And to me, that's learning and technology. That's me being able to use the technology that's available to me in a digital world and supporting my learning with it in an almost unconscious way. And that's the lens through which I look. That's why the language is important, because that's the lens that we need to be looking at in terms of how technology is changing the way we learn and the way that organizations support learning, not necessarily through the lens of just the more narrow lens of education and training.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I know for myself, when I, for example, attend DevLearn, I'm scanning that expo hall. I'm looking at everything. I'm looking for the trends. You know, what's new on the rise? What was new a year or two ago that now I'm seeing like a large percentage of folks in the expo hall who have whatever this thing was, that now is just commonplace. Like it's no longer a buzzword. It's now common practice. It's everybody has this thing, whatever it may be. But to your point, I'm always looking for what's a piece of technology. Doesn't even have to be tagged as learning technology, but what is some technology out there that could be integrated to create a more innovative learning experience, an engaging learning experience, and a learning experience that sticks.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, what are some buzzwords in L&D that you think HR professionals probably need to be paying attention to?
When I talk about putting things in context, one of the first things I always encourage people to look at as a red flag is the actual word buzzword itself. And that's largely, I don't like buzzwords, largely because of the way that I personally define them. I define buzzword as a term whose usage is spreading faster than its understanding. And that's a fairly dangerous concept if you look at it through that lens. And the challenge is that there are a lot of things that become buzzwords, and putting in the context of what we're talking about here, there are a lot of technologies that people are, we got to do this, we got to do that. Everybody's talking about this, it's hot. We have to do it for ourselves without necessarily the context of what the true value of it is and what it really, how it can help people. An example of which I will, one of the popular buzzwords in L&D right now is this idea of microlearning, which does have value, but I believe that the interpretation of how it's spread in terms of the buzz and how people are applying it before they really understand the true value of it has hampered its ability to be a mainstream use tool. For instance, and this is an oversimplification, but one of the challenges of what I'm talking about with the buzzword in the context of microlearning is that it became so popular so fast that people started focusing on that. What grew in that conversation was this idea that it needed to be small content, that it focused on the micro of the content itself, which is an element of it, but not the driving value. The micro of the real value of something like microlearning isn't necessarily in the size of the content. It's in reducing the size of the context, in the sense that I have a specific issue and a specific problem, and you're going to give me just what I need for that particular thing, so that I can get what I need and move on and apply it and get on with my life. But somewhere in the speed of everybody wanting to take advantage of this new trend of microlearning, that kind of got lost in translation a little bit. I think you always go through these hype curves that allow things that everybody's going to have this, and then when everyone starts applying it, the reality sets in of it's not really going to change the world and replace everything that we do, and then you get kind of back up into this normal space that you were talking about earlier. But microlearning is one of our biggest buzzes. I've already kind of touched on that. There's a lot of interest in our field around new platforms. We've been dealing with learning management systems for quite some time as the primary repository and delivery mechanism for technology-based learning. And for the most part, there's been iterations of advancements over the years. The expectations of what a learning management system delivers has not radically changed in the last couple of decades. But there is a lot of effort, not only in the learning management system space, but new platforms like learning experience designs and LXPs, where you can get these different types of platforms that can do different things and track different types of activity that are connected to learning, so that you can get closer to understanding people's competencies. Those are still emerging rapidly, because there's new technologies being added all the time. And those are one of the ones that I do think that both L&D and HR professionals should be looking at, because it does have the potential to be a transformative change in the way that we apply L&D practices and the way that we're able to measure the effectiveness of L&D practices.
No, I agree with you. I'm going to hit on 2 points there. One, with the whole learning experience platforms, it's interesting to me, similar to the micro-learning piece, where there's a buzzword about learning experience, and now I've seen a number of LMS entities touting, and we do learning experience too. And without, it may be, there are facets of that, but I think it's more around the buzzword of, oh yes, we're on that bandwagon. Similarly as the whole trend of microlearning, which really has been a concept of this just-in-time learning for a number of years. So the buzzword on that, it's like, I think people have been watching, is that going to stick? Will it, not just from a buzzword standpoint, but the context, the content, the concept, will it stick? I know for us, we have developed our own, we call it the 4-pillar methodology of great microlearning. And it's just great. The 4 pillars, yes, it fits inside of a microlearning, but also it's this iterative approach in a longer course or certification, some simple best practices that, to your point, I think sometimes people can lose sight of in trying to just simply create micro learning. The best analogy I have is, if I need to know how to change the oil in my truck, I'm going to Google. I'm going to Google the make and model and year. I'm going to watch just enough of perhaps a YouTube video. I'm not looking for a quiz. I don't want a quiz. I'm just going to watch just enough so I can go do that thing and come back and check and see, did I do it right? And I think if we come at microlearning from that standpoint of creating learning that meets a need right in the moment to let someone do their job better, then we're certainly helping close that gap.
Yeah, I've often said in conversations I've had and presentations I've given that microlearning isn't really about learning at all in the context of the person consuming it. It's more about them like solving a problem. And the example that you gave is just that. You didn't necessarily come to that environment of, I want to learn how to change the oil in my car as something I want to know, maintain, and develop skill at. I just want to do it right now. Yes. And I'm going to watch this YouTube video. I'm not concerned about retaining this information long-term necessarily, but I want to do it right now. So show me how to do it. And that's the problem-solving aspect of like microlearning that I think is core to its true value myself.
Yeah. So you mentioned, learning experience platform, something we should pay attention to. Are there other technologies that you think have like the most transformative effect on the future of learning that we should be looking for?
So that as I mentioned earlier, it's got to be put in context. So for me, looking at it from a broad stroke standpoint, I look at the technologies and I say, what are some of the technologies that are out there that are going to enable us to do things we've never been able to do before, or to enable us to be more effective at things than we currently are today? And then you have to put it into your own individual context as whether or not that even applies in your situation. So two examples that are very popular right now are AR and VR, these new technologies that are emerging. And I do think that they're emerging. Virtual reality is a little bit further ahead in terms of its adoption right now. And I can see virtual reality being a tool in the context of what I was just describing that fits very well in that description, in the sense that it's not going to be this broad-based tool that is going to replace everything that we're doing. But it is going to have a very narrow use case that solves problems that we were not able to do before. You take it, I mean, we're already seeing examples of it in some of the larger verticals like medical field and the military, where they're applying virtual reality to get people to practice scenarios that you really wouldn't be able to get that level of a practical experience through any other means other than actually applying it in the real world. And when you have scenarios like firefighting and medical, where the risk of failure of a particular task is literally life and death, the ability of creating a simulation that replicates that as close to possible in the real world, where you can practice that, becomes incredibly valuable. So it's a very narrow use case long term, but a use case that is going to enable us to do things we've never been able to do before. The flip side of that would be augmented reality, which is a little further behind in its current adoption right now, but I personally believe has a much broader and more powerful use case to potentially redefine how we even look at education and training in our organizations. Augmented reality is looked at, one of the primary markets that the augmented reality hardware vendors are looking at is the enterprise, in terms of being able to put these applications into workplaces to assist people in the work that they're doing. In some contexts, that's going to be used to help train people, but in many other contexts, we tend to look in L&D at these tools as, how am I going to use this to do what I do? And that's the wrong lens to look at new technologies, especially AR being a great example of that. It's not just, how do I use this tool to educate and train people? It's, how is this tool going to be used in the workplace? And what does that mean to my work? Yeah. Because the majority of the AR purchases that are out there right now aren't being bought by training departments. They're being bought by the manufacturing floor, so that the workers can use them. And they're going to be using them to find out how they can do their jobs better. And we need to be able to support that world, even if we're not necessarily using it through the traditional lens of education and training.
So I'm betting that we have some viewers and listeners, David, that are thinking, wait, what is virtual reality? What is augmented reality? How are they different? Mm-hmm. Can you just distill that just in simple layman terms, so that
Sure.
folks are really clear of what the differences and distinguishing factors are?
Sure. So they're both headsets, and that AR is available on your phone, but I see that as a stepping stone to where it really needs to go, which is headsets. So they're both headsets that put digital assets in front of you. In the case of virtual reality, it blocks everything out. So you literally remove yourself from the real world, and it takes you someplace digitally. It takes you someplace else digital. In an augmented reality world, instead of being a screen that blocks everything out, it is a glass that's in front of you that digital assets are projected. So it's bringing the asset into the real world in some way. And usually it's an overlay that is giving you context on something. So a simple example of augmented reality that demonstrates what I'm talking about there is, if I was walking around New York City and I approach a street, and the same way I look at my phone and it tells me a map to go left, I now just have glasses on and I'm looking at the intersection, and there's an arrow on the world that says go to the left here. That's how you need to go. So one augments the actual world in front of you, that's augmented reality, and the other one takes you someplace else entirely in an entirely digital environment, and that's virtual reality.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So when it comes to putting emerging technology into context, what's the most important question you think HR professionals should be asking?
A lot of people, when I get asked this question, a lot of people are looking for some sort of a very deep, detailed, secretive answer, secret sauce or anything like that. And it's really not that complicated for me. I mean, yes, you need to go into the weeds of of the individual technologies and understand their features and benefits and how they can be applied. But at the highest level, it's a very simple question, which is what problem is it going to solve? If you're considering implementing something and you can't answer that base question, I challenge you to convince me as to why you should spend that money. There's a lot of interest in a lot of these new technologies. Like I mentioned AR and VR, there's a lot of people like, ooh, these are really cool, interesting technologies. Let's talk about how we're going to, let's get them and start applying them. But what problem is it going to solve? I am, unfortunately, I know there's going to be a lot of organizations out there that are going to buy a lot of these headsets, not have a real use case for them, not solving any problem they don't know they can do. And one day they're going to open the closet and they're going to put them on a shelf next to the tablets that they bought 10 years ago because they were going to do everything on tablets, and they didn't answer that question then. Yeah. That's the challenge, is if you can't give yourself that answer of what problem is this going to solve, or what are we going to be able to do differently that is substantially better than what we can do today, then you got to question whether or not you should be buying that technology at all.
Well, David, I think everything you just said is so right on with helping learning and development professionals be aligned to their organization's trajectory. You know, what's the vision for your organization? Where 3 to 5 year goal? What are the annual objectives? And then everything needs to be aligned to that, which leads us to just what you said. Okay, well, what are the business gaps, problems, challenges we have in reaching those goals? Great. And is it a training related need? When we discern that, then how do we leverage technology that is available to us? Yep. To help close those gaps? So
yeah, and one of the challenges I do think we have within L&D, historically, we can be a fairly siloed organization within that. And we always, there's been discussions in our industry for ages about getting a seat on the table and trying to become more integrated into the business. And there are things that we can do to improve that. But taking that aside for a second, the world of work is changing. Technologies are becoming more integrated and more interconnected than ever before. So our ability to stay siloed is constraining over time. And we're going to need, whether we want to proactively try to become more integrated in our support of the business, or whether we're going to have to react to just that happening naturally as businesses become more integrated through the technologies that they're using, we have to move in that direction as a field.
Yeah. So you're a learning nerd, as am I, so I can call you that. What's on your bookshelf that you're reading that we probably want to look at and consider having on our bookshelves?
Sure. So one book that I always recommend people, anybody in our field should read, anybody who's in either embedded in L&D or even peripheral to it, to understand why we do the work that we do and how we do it, is a book by Julie Dirksen called Design for How People Learn. It is very, very tactical, but it also frames the way that you look at the work that we do, and more importantly, frames the way that you look at the people that you're supporting. It very, very, very detailed and tactically describes what's going on in someone's head when you're trying to get them to adjust their behavior, and that it very well frames the lens through which we should be looking at the work we do. The other recommendation is one of my great books, but very tactically needed right now, is called Interact and Engage by Cassie Laboria and Tom Stone. It focuses specifically on virtual worlds and virtual classroom technologies, which everybody suddenly is using given the current context. And it's a book that I always have readily available at my shelf because it's got 50 plus, I think it's got over 50 different activities that you can use to engage people in those environments so that you're just not talking to them. It's the type of thing that I occasionally will just flip. I got a classroom coming up, I'll just flip through and say, oh, that's a good idea, I can apply that here. It's a good reference book, especially given the context that we're in right now.
No, that's great. I think both of those are about 2015 copyright. So it's interesting that to me, it's a long shelf life, yep. that it would be 5 years old and still relevant. But I think what you just hit on, sometimes I think like the 50 activities, something that sparks ideas, you can't leave it up to a book to bring your brains to you, but the book should be able to spark some really great ideas and build on and make some new connections. So thank you for those resources.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, thank you, David, for taking the time to share your experience and insights with us. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Don't forget to check out our archived episodes on HR.com, where we release new episodes every week, so you can stay up to date on all things HR. Have a great day. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to HR.com Live. We have new episodes daily to help you maximize your potential. Be sure to check out our archives on HR.com and share it with your friends. Cheers.